The woke mages of the world want you to believe that necromancy is a crime against humanity, but what they don't understand is that necromancy is fucking rad. While Fire Emblem has had reviving the dead be a main gameplay mechanic since the literal first game, the necromancy I want to talk about today is the concept of the Deadlords, the main big bad of whatever Fire Emblem game they're in, bringing back powerful villains from the lore of the game to fight the player, usually on the final map or a map close to the end. I think the way this concept has been utilized throughout the franchise is really cool, and I wanted to showcase it for some people who might not have played all the games, or just never really thought about them. But before we get into it, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. I know asking for that before a video even begins is really tacky, so I'm not asking, I'm threatening. If you don't like, comment, and subscribe, I will use my own necromantic powers to bring back Margaret Thatcher. And you know, it took us 87 years to get rid of her the first time, so just imagine how long it'll take for the second.
There is no meme. This is just a threat.
The Deadlords first appear in Fire Emblem 4's final map, where they are summoned by the main villain Julius to help defend him against the player's final attack. And for their first appearance, there sure is a whole lot of absolutely nothing going on. In fact, if it weren't for the opening text crawl of the chapter referring to them by name, or by Julius referring to them by name when he summons them, you really wouldn't be able to tell that these 12 units are anything other than generic goons. The only thing that makes them unique is the fact that they all have names. Not even a portrait, just a name. Specifically, they're named 1 through 12 in German. But for the most part, they just show up, get in the player's way, and die without any real fanfare. Which is a little disappointing for such a cool concept of reanimating the souls of warriors past. But what they lack in being interesting in story, they do make up for in gameplay. And by they, I really mean one specifically. Because the Deadlord Zen is responsible for one of my favorite ways to fight a final boss in any video game ever. Not just Fire Emblem, any video game ever. See, Julius, the final boss of FE4, is very, very difficult. He has a special tome that halves all damage, is immune to critical hits or any sword skills, and will automatically crit you if he's at half health or less. Combine that with his high natural bulk and the fact that he's on a castle, giving him health regen and more defenses, he is virtually impossible to kill unless you get Julia's help, which is what the entire back end of the final map is designed around. But the Deadlord Zen allows you to do some stupid bullshit instead, as Zen is armed with the Hell Tome. What the Hell Tome does is it automatically sets an enemy's health to 1. So what you do is you berserk Zen, either by using the staff or the sword, and then have him attack Julius and set his HP to 1. It's not the most accurate attack in the world, but it's high enough that you can keep resetting until it does what you want it to do, and then you can just plink Julius with anyone, instantly beating the game without ever having to deal with Manfroy. It's a really, really funny way to beat Fire Emblem 4, but it's really all the Deadlords have going for them. And it's not even really the Deadlords. Any enemy with a Hell Tome next to Julius could have achieved the same effect. But thankfully, the next game makes them way more interesting. In Fire Emblem 5's final chapter, Veld and Manfroy are talking about the Deadlords, with Veld remarking that he just made one, and Manfroy saying that he's giving Veld 5 of them in order to help him fight Leaf. This shows that, 1, it's not just the power of the Dark God Lopter making them. Anyone in his cult with enough magical power seems to be able to make the Deadlords, and that they're specifically made by putting souls into already dead bodies, perhaps similar to how Forseti possesses Lewin. And it's worth noting that the 6 Deadlords at the end of Fire Emblem 5 share names with some of the Deadlords in Fire Emblem 4, showing that these are, in fact, the same souls, and that Deadlords can seem to be reincarnated as many times as a Dark Mage makes them. And what's even cooler about the FE5 Deadlords is that the player can know the exact dead bodies that were used to reincarnate them. The one that Veld made will always be Raedric, the main villain of the game that the player defeated 1 or 2 chapters prior to the final chapter. And Manfroy's 5 will just be generic enemies if the player has achieved max recruitment, but if the player has failed to save Dagdar, Lithis, Sarah, Galzus, or Avail, those 5 will be the dead bodies used to make the Deadlords, with their portraits being fucked up versions of their normal ones. As for why Manfroy used those 5 dead bodies specifically, you can hazard some guesses, though there's no concrete fact. Avail and Galzus both have Holy Blood, which could play into Manfroy using them because Holy Blood just produces stronger warriors. Sarah is Manfroy's granddaughter, which, first of all, the fact that he would desecrate his granddaughter's dead body to make a Deadlord is a layer of villainy and scumfuckery about Manfroy that I feel like really gets overlooked, but it also could be Manfroy's own magical bloodline making Sarah stronger, thus an apt candidate for a Deadlord. Lithis is made a Deadlord because he deserves to have this happen to him on a karmic level, and Dagdar's the one that I outright could not hazard a guess as to why. There's nothing noteworthy about Dagdar in lore. I don't know, maybe Manfroy just liked his beard. And on top of them all 6 being threatening enemies, Avail also has a very interesting bit with her Deadlord, as the other 5 all link up to the classes that the Deadlord is. Dagdar's a warrior, and the Deadlord he becomes is a warrior. Raedric is a baron, and his Deadlord is a baron, etc., etc., except Avail. Avail is a swordmaster, but her Deadlord is a sniper, in allusion to her true identity as Brigid, which is something that, if a player got Avail killed, they could not have known at that point in the game, as the reveal that Avail and Brigid are one and the same only happens if you save her in 24x. So for a blind player, that might start to give them questions about who Avail really is. It's a very clever way to use the Deadlords, even if who exactly the souls of the Deadlords are isn't explained at any point in either game. There's 12 of them, and there are 12 Crusaders, so maybe it has something to do with that? But the classes don't line up perfectly, and only some of them have Holy Blood. There's no real answer as to who the Deadlords are, which on the one hand can kind of make them cooler with the air of mystery, but I would have preferred to at least know something about who these 12 people are. Before we move on to Fire Emblem 7, it's worth noting that technically, the term Deadlord refers to these 12 units from Fire Emblem 4. They appear in Fire Emblem 4, 5, and Awakening. So these next groups of units I'm talking about technically aren't Deadlords, but they're the same basic idea, so I'm calling them Deadlords anyway. Fire Emblem 7's Deadlords might be my favorite iteration of them in the entire series, as they are the corpses of the Black Fang reincarnated by Nurgle. The Black Fang are a group of virtuous assassins that throughout the story of Fire Emblem 7, the player realizes might not actually be that fucked up and evil. It's Nurgle that's tricking them and deceiving them into being as wicked as they are. And after the player has gone through the game and tragically had to eliminate all of the Black Fang, in the final battle, Nurgle uses their corpses to make morphs, the homunculi that he's been using to gather power throughout the entire game. And much like the Deadlords in Fire Emblem 5, they all have fucked up versions of their normal portraits when you fight them, showing that they are degrading corpses and not a healthy human being. Not only does this fit Nurgle's MO of a kind of mad scientist, there's also a few more cool gameplay quirks. One, this is how you get to fight the leader of the Black Fang, Brendan Reed, who was built up in the story for a while, but the player never got to fight him because he was killed in a cutscene, so actually getting to fight him is kind of cool. And the Reed brothers, Lloyd and Linus, have an A support just like they did in Life, and it does work when you fight them as bosses on this map. There's something poetic about the brothers' love for each other, still persisting even in death. I just think it's such a melancholy detail that's really, really cool. And one more gameplay quirk that's a bit funny, the player has never seen one of these Deadlords. Germ and Kenneth are both fought on route split maps. You cannot have fought one and the other on the same playthrough. So for someone's first time through FE7, they're going to see one of the two of them and just go, who the fuck is this guy? Which is something that I kind of forgot having played FE7 so many times. I just think that's kind of funny. And what's not funny are the boss conversations with the Deadlords, something I feel like Fire Emblem 5 really could have benefited from. Nino and Legault have a lot of conversations with the Black Fang, and having Nino kill her family, again, is really sad, but Legault also has some gut-wrenching conversations with them that play a big part in why he's, personally, my favorite character in the game and one of my favorite characters in the franchise. They're just a really, really good iteration of the Deadlords. Commander, I really didn't want to see you like this. All I can give you is one last act of rebellion. Linus, I'll see you again. I'm sure you're angry, but please, be my friend again. Fire Emblem 8 also has a Deadlord, though emphasis on Deadlord singular. In the game's penultimate chapter, the Great Dragon Morva stands against the game's final boss, Demon King. Unfortunately, Morva is not strong enough to beat him, and immediately after killing him, the Demon King revives his dead body to stand in the player's way. Morva's a character that's been built up in the story for a long time now with his daughter Myr, and it makes for a very, very sad fight when you finally get to him and he's just a zombified corpse. Though I will admit, a zombie dragon is a really fucking cool thing to be, and you can kill him with his daughter. Which is really fucked up that you would make Myr do that, but tragically, given that her Dragonstone is effective against undead, Myr is kind of one of the best units to kill Morva. So, it is statistically intelligent trauma. Though, while he was built up for the entire game, Morva himself only is on screen for about 30 seconds before he dies, so I'm not going to act like it's one of the saddest scenes in Fire Emblem history or anything, but I think for what it is, Morva's death and reanimation is handled very well, and if he counts as a Deadlord, I think he's a solid showing of it. The concept of the Deadlords do not appear in Tellius at all, and since they weren't in Arcanea to begin with, the remakes don't have them there either. It's Awakening that has the next incarnation of the Deadlords, and they are the same 12 warriors from Yggdrasil. Aversa summons them towards the end of the game, only remarking that they were 12 great warriors in life, and are now even greater in death. Still not really explaining who they were, but given that they have the exact same names as the ones from Yggdrasil, and some of them even drop Yggdrasil weapons, they are the same Deadlords. Though, now that they're in an officially localized game, their names are no longer 1 through 12 in German. The localizers instead name them after the animals of the Chinese zodiac, just in Latin instead of English. Which is a weird choice, but, I'm not a localizer.
Get them!
Hey, I've been turned into a cow. Can I go home?
You're excused. Anyone else?
No, we're good. We're good.
While they don't have that much interest in the story of Awakening, the DLC has them show up in a pretty funny iteration, honestly, as they appear in the Infinite Regalia DLC. The point of the DLC is that the Deadlords are now guardians of ancient weapons, just a grab bag of legendary weapons from Fire Emblem's entire history to that point, and they all have some level of personality now. They're no longer just husks repossessed to fight the player. They seem to just want to fight one more good battle. They don't have any malicious intent, they're just doing their job guarding these sacred treasures, and are kind of just lonely and want to fight someone. there's actually a pretty funny gag where all 36 of the Deadlords in the DLC, if you're wondering, names are reused so that there are 36 of them, it's still the same 12 souls, where they want to talk to Crom in sequence. All 36 of them want to say a few lines of dialogue, acting as if they're in a Trails of Cold Steel cutscene, and Crom keeps cutting them off so that he doesn't have to listen to all of them. It's a funny little bit, honestly, and on the surface, it's a much more light-hearted interpretation of the Deadlords, but since the humor lands, I would be willing to say it's a good thing. However, they actually have some depth underneath the surface. All the units have their own unique dialogue when fighting a Deadlord for the first time, and what's especially interesting are the children's dialogue with them. Lucina, Owain, all the Gen 2 units have dialogue alluding to the fact that the Deadlords feel familiar. Lucina thinks she sees the mark of the Exalt, which should only be on her and her father. Yarn says that he can sense a Tagwell, and Laurent even theorizes that one of the Deadlords could very well be his mother from another time. It's all but directly confirmed that the 36 Deadlords in Fire Emblem Awakening's DLC are the dead bodies of Awakening's first generation, repossessed to defend the Regalia. It also matches up with 36 being the number of Gen 1 units in Awakening. So it's actually very depressing to realize you're fighting yourself. It's actually very clever what they do here. I think it takes what was initially just something goofy and makes it very interesting and kind of really sad. Also, this has absolutely nothing to do with anything, but Gregor says that he learned a dick joke from a cabaret to one of the Deadlords. I learned of that while doing research for this video, and I had to tell someone, so there you go. Before we move on to later cases in the franchise I feel fit the Deadlord label, I'm going to remark that I don't consider every instance of necromancy in the series to be a Deadlord thing. It's why I didn't bring up Vigard in the Sacred Stones bit, and going forward, I'm specifically going to be talking about the Heirs of Fate DLC, Nemesis and the 10 Elites, and the Dark Emblems at the end of Engage. I understand if you think someone like Mikoto or Lumera could be considered a Deadlord, I just don't really think they fit the bill of legendary heroes summoned to fight the protagonist that the Deadlords I've talked about prior are. But then again, by that same logic, you might not consider Morva one. Fire Emblem archetypes are all entirely based on vibes anyway, so I'm just going to talk about the ones that I think fit, and if you don't think they fit, fair enough. Back in the day, Heirs of Fate was considered, even among Fate's most vocal haters, to be the best part of the game, and I completely agree. The story beats of Heirs of Fate make the second generation of Fates, which is often criticized for being unnecessary and, God, the baby dimension, into something that's really good. And a big part of that is how the Heirs of Fate uses the Deadlords. In it, Anankos has killed the parents of all the child units in Fates, and in one of its final battles, you have to fight the possessed bodies of the Fire Emblem Fates fathers. And every single child has a boss conversation with their father, and they can be very gut-wrenching. It takes the ideas started way back with Legault and really makes a personal hell for every child. And I think that is absolutely awesome. It caps off what is honestly the best part of Fire Emblem Fates, and does a tremendous job using the concept of fighting dead bodies. It's an amazing chapter, and if I could take off the nostalgia goggles for Fire Emblem 7, it's probably the best iteration of the Deadlords in the entire franchise. It is really good. Do Byleth and Citri count as Deadlords? I mean, Citri was an experiment on the attempt to reincarnate Sothis, so it's kind of following in the same steps as a Deadlord. Interesting food for thought. Thankfully, Fire Emblem Three Houses has more concrete reanimated dead people. In the Golden Deer route of Fire Emblem Three Houses, its final boss is Nemesis, the ancient bandit king revived by those who slither in the dark, making him a pretty obvious Deadlord. In his final battle, he also resurrects the 10 elites, bearers of some of the original crests of Fodlan. Nemesis himself is a really cool character, kind of being the statement on how history can be propagandized by people in power, and his revival and fight is pretty good as well. The 10 elites, sadly, are not nearly as interesting as Nemesis, as he just kind of brings them back as mindless puppets. It would have been cool to have some boss conversations with everyone fighting their ancestor, though Claude is the only one to make a reference to the fact that he's potentially fighting an ancestor. Everyone else doesn't say a goddamn thing, which after how good Heirs of Fate was, I feel like is a real missed opportunity. But that's more so criticizing it for what it isn't than what it is. What it is a solid iteration of the Deadlords, with Nemesis being one of the more interesting characters in the mythos of Three Houses, in my opinion. There's not too much to say about them in Three Houses, as it would quickly become a dive into the character of Nemesis, which, while that's a worthy video in its own right, is not what this video's about. The Deadlords show up in Fire Emblem Three Houses, they're a pretty cool final fight for the Golden Deer, and that's all they need to be. I have no idea if this last one even counts as Deadlords, but they fit the idea of bringing back dead warriors from the past, or in this case alternate dimensions, so fuck it, we're talking about the final map of Fire Emblem Engage. To cap off Fire Emblem Engage's fanservice tribute to the franchise, the final map of Engage has enemies that are meant to stand in for each of the main villains of the game's past, and every single emblem has a conversation with their respective main villain. There aren't any kind of grand conversations here, it's more often than not just an acknowledgement that the emblem recognizes the villain, but that's all it really needs to be. You point at a name of a villain and go, holy fuck, that's Medeus, and you pog, and then you move on with your life. It doesn't really need to be anything more than that. It's cute, it's cool, and in gameplay they're kind of interesting, as they function, if I had to actually make a comparison, to the 4 clerics from the end of Fire Emblem 3, where you have to take care of them before you can really deal with the giant dragon thing in the center of the map. In fact, Sombron also doesn't move in the final battle, much like Medeus doesn't move in the final battle of Fire Emblem 3. Huh, I wonder if that was intentional. So, as you can see, the Deadlords come up a lot in the series, and they're more often than not really cool in how they work. Honestly, the worst iteration of them is the first iteration, which is kind of what you would hope for in an archetype, that it just gets better as it goes along. I really like the concept of Deadlords from a mythos standpoint. I feel like you could really do something better with what Three Houses did, and let the 10 elites be something a bit more interesting in a future game. Fortune's Weave has an amazing chance to bring back these 10 elite Deadlords and do something really cool with them. In fact, I'm willing to bet that Fortune's Weave will have Deadlords, and if they don't, you can come back to this video and call me a liar. I'm willing to bet on it. Of course, no matter what Fortune's Weave does with the Deadlords, it's never going to be as good as Siegfried from The Last Promise, but that's another topic entirely. Before this video ends, I would like to thank my patrons, whose constant support has helped fund my life, and by fund my life, I mean give me more money to waste on Taco Bell and video games. My patrons include the likes of Across the Night, Adebayo Thompson, Alex Orliga, Amu is not beating the Tails allegations, Andrew Crockett, Bean Juice, Hell on Heelys, Jay Hyun, Jespacito 2, Larmachi, Lichuman, Ly70 Bolt, Morgan Logan, Played Arrow, Played is pronounced like the pattern, Rangerman Sam, Sean Vossi, Shen Lu, Viri the Artist, Ya Girl Owen, Brentendo 11, Drew Hack, Fire Emblem Lord, Ginger, Gugu Gaga, Cornelia Milkers 92, Inverse, Lev Maverick, Maple Knight, and Upscale Furry Trash. Thank you all for your continued support, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.